Welcome, everybody, to On This Day on the Grizzly Crew Sports Network. I'm your host for On This Day, Mike Goodpaster. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite Super Bowls of all time, Super Bowl 14, which happened on this day, January the 20th, 1980. Now, this is a game that the LA Rams weren't even supposed to be in. They finished the season 9-7, were a wild card in 1979, and basically pulled a couple upsets, including beating the Dallas Cowboys in Roger Staubach's last game in Dallas. Then they went on to beat the upstart Tampa Bay Buccaneers 9-0. They had great players like Jack Youngblood, who played the playoffs on a broken leg. Of course, they called it a non-weight-bearing bone. And it took a near-record passing day from Terry Bradshaw. It took two sensational catches by John Stallworth, one by Lynn Swann. It took a last-quarter interception by the Steelers' great linebacker Jack Lambert. It took everything the mighty Pittsburgh Steelers could muster to finally subdue the stubborn LA Rams. They win the game 31-19. They went in as 11-point favorites, but this is a game where the Steelers win their unprecedented, at the time, unprecedented fourth Super Bowl title, and the game was much closer than the score. Now, people went in thinking this was going to be a dull, one-sided game, but the 11-point underdog Rams made it one of the best and most exciting Super Bowls up until this point, with a gritty performance, especially from inexperienced quarterback Vince Ferragamo, who almost outdid the Hall of Famer Terry Bradshaw. Now, Ferragamo is a guy that a year later would sign a big contract with the Montreal Alouettes and actually fail in the CFL before returning back to play for the Rams and then later the Bills. He was never what he was at the end of this season. But Bradshaw was not about to let the Steelers' bid for football immortality get away on this day. He shrugged off 3 interceptions, a stiff Rams pass rush, and rallied his team to 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns before a thrilled throng of 103,985 in the Rose Bowl. This was also the first time that basically the home team played in the Super Bowl. The Rams were in L.A. This game was in L.A. Of course, the Rams played at the old Municipal Stadium, but the Rose Bowl, close enough. Now, the game's most valuable player, which was Bradshaw, now had, after this game, a record 9 touchdown passes in Super Bowl games, passing Roger Staubach, who held the record of 8 at that time. The Steelers would now lay claim to being a football dynasty, pointing to 4 titles in 6 years as ample proof of that ability. But the Rams walked away from this game just as proudly after producing an effort that probably would have won most Super Bowl games in history. Bradshaw's 2 touchdown passes and his 309 throwing yards, second best in Super Bowl history at the time, were made possible only by the talents of Stallworth and Swann, whose knack for producing big plays exposed perhaps the only weakness in the Rams' defense. Stallworth, who felt he was ignored unjustly by Bradshaw in the first half, scored what became the winning touchdown by sensationally pulling in a 73-yard bomb early in the last quarter to erode a 19-17 Rams lead. Then he somehow leaned back and gathered in a 45-yarder among 3 Rams defenders with 3 minutes left to set up Franco Harris's 1-yard icing-on-the-cake score, his second of the game. And basically, if you watch this game again, the terrible towels were going nuts. Now, Swann, who suffered a slight concussion late in the third period, got Pittsburgh's offense untracked right after halftime with one of his patented leaping grabs between 2 Rams. He stumbled at the 2 before twirling into the end zone for a 47-yard score. "This is probably the best Super Bowl win we've ever had," said Chuck Noll, who showed a rare hint of emotion in the Steelers' joyless locker room. But Noll was far less happy in the final minutes when the Rams, trailing by 24-19, and knowing their chances of winning came down to this one drive, drove all the way down to the Pittsburgh 32 with about 3 or 4 minutes left of the game. And that is when Ferragamo made his only mistake of the game. A wayward pass that middle linebacker Jack Lambert picked off before the Steelers struck for their final touchdown. The errant throw, however, did not distract from Ferragamo's effort. In only his 7th pro start, he shredded Pittsburgh's proud steel curtain defense for 212 yards and 3 times moved the Rams into the lead. The Rams' pride was hurt by a point spread that made them 11-point underdogs, and although they finally lost by 12, they were no pushovers. They scratched and clawed, pulling out all the stops, but they never could find a way to handle Bradshaw and his brilliant receivers. Both clubs served notice early that this was going to be a high-scoring affair, much like Pittsburgh's scintillating win the year before in Super Bowl XIII over the Dallas Cowboys. A 41-yard field goal by Barr on the Steelers' first possession was offset immediately by a 1-yard touchdown run by Rams' Colin Bryant after Wendell Tyler had spread it 39 yards around left end. So much for any Pittsburgh romp. Pittsburgh answered with 4 Bradshaw completions that set up a Harris 1-yard scoring sweep. When Barr hit the conversion, the Steelers had a 10-7 lead in the second period. Ferragamo would not fold. He threw for 16 yards to Lawrence McCutcheon to get the ball to the Pittsburgh 20. Then Donnie Shell was called for interference at the Steelers' 18. When the Rams stalled, Frank Corral tied the game up 10-10 with a 31-yard field goal. By now, everybody realized the Rams were not kidding. And to emphasize that point, they took advantage of Bradshaw's first interception to set up a 15-yard field goal and a 13-10 advantage with just 11 seconds to go in the half. Knowles said he told his players nothing special in the locker room at intermission. We just knew we weren't playing with usual Steeler intensity, Lambert said. We had to change that. Pittsburgh did just that quickly. On the 5th play of the third quarter, Bradshaw threw a soaring pass toward Swan, who had barely outran Pat Thomas down the sideline before angling to the middle. Bradshaw later said they were blitzing. We were in man-to-man coverage. I audibilized at the line and let it go. Just a safety, Nolan Cromwell, came over to help Thomas by attempting to bat away the ball. Swan started his jump. He went higher and higher, finally pulling in the ball while at least 3 feet above the ground. He came down, kept his balance, and danced in for the 47-yard touchdown score. Surely this stunning blow, one that had become a Steeler trademark the last 2 seasons, would finally brush off these pesky Rams. It did not. Ferragamo took a page from Bradshaw's Go for Broke book. He found Billy Waddy 46 yards down the field, and Waddy turned the pass into an eye-catching reception by pulling the ball away from Pittsburgh's Ron Johnson at the Steelers' 24-yard line. Before their foes could recover, the Rams struck again. Lawrence McCutcheon began a sweep around right in. He then pulled up and passed to Ron Smith, who got behind J.T. Thomas. Smith pulled in the accurate toss and moved it to the end zone for the score. After Corral missed the conversion, the Rams held a 19-17 lead with 4:45 gone in the quarter. Those fans who had booed their team so vigorously during a 9-7 regular season, who had thought the club had no chance of making this far, now were beside themselves with joy. But Los Angeles couldn't capitalize on 2 more interceptions of Bradshaw. The Rams had the Steelers on the edge, but they just couldn't apply the final blow. On a 3rd down from his 27, Bradshaw dropped back and looked for Stallworth, who was running a hook-and-go pattern. He was being covered by Rod Perry, a talented cornerback who had been sidelined much of the season with a bad calf. Perry lunged for the ball at the Rams' 35, but missed with a swipe of his arm. Stallworth gathered in a pass and without missing a stride and scampered untouched for his Super Bowl record 3rd touchdown while Perry lay on the turf. The Steelers now led 24-19 with just 12 minutes left in the game. The Rams had come too far now to stop. They mounted one last scoring threat, again with Ferragamo providing the impetus. His 24-yard completion to Preston Denard and a 15-yarder to Waddy had Los Angeles at the Steelers' 32. The L.A. offensive line, which was having trouble with the Steelers' blitz, was providing excellent protection, and the Rams' receivers were getting open, and the Steelers seemed confused. But not Jack Lambert. Ferragamo wanted to pass to Smith on a cut-in pattern. Lambert was playing a deep zone, and Ferragamo never saw him as he caught the pass at the 25. Ferragamo later said he made a good play, and I probably made a bad decision. Pittsburgh now could sense victory. Bradshaw again called a hook-and-go pattern to Stallworth. But I was sure they wouldn't be in the same defense when I came up to the line. Doggone it if they weren't, said Bradshaw. Stallworth cut between Perry and Dave Elmendorf while Bradshaw let go of the pass. As it came to Stallworth, Cromwell came over to help. All 3 Rams were thwarted as Stallworth reached back and cradled the ball against his chest for a 45-yard gain to the LA 22. It was Stallworth's 3rd reception for 121 yards. It became Bradshaw's final completion, giving him a 14-for-21 day with 309 passing yards. 2 plays later, Thomas was called for interfering with Jim Smith in the end zone. On the 3rd try from the 1, Harris bolted over, Barr kicked a conversion, and the Steelers had their 4th world championship. Now, to me, what made this game so great was the lack of great games in the past. I mean, Super Bowls 10 and 13 were great games. Terry Bradshaw, I think, gets underrated big time. Terry Bradshaw threw at least one touchdown pass in the fourth quarter of all Super Bowls that the Steelers won. And the thing is, all four games were close enough. If he doesn't throw those passes, they may lose. So I think Terry Bradshaw gets shorthanded here big time when people talk about the greatest quarterbacks of all time, because on the biggest stage in the fourth quarter, nobody was better than Terry Bradshaw. And the LA Rams, on the other hand, Vince Ferragamo was never the same as what he was those last 7 or 8 weeks of that 1979 season. But one day in LA at the Rose Bowl, they came real close to pulling one of the biggest upsets in Super Bowl history. I would say Super Bowl 3 and 4 were the only upsets bigger, maybe Super Bowl 42. But really, if you lived at this time period, most people did not give the Rams a chance here. I mean, this Rams team did upset the Cowboys in the playoffs in Dallas, and they also in 1980 beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 9-0. But nobody really took the Buccaneers serious either. The Buccaneers were a team that lost 5 or 6 games straight trying to clinch the playoffs before they finally did it in a downpour against the Kansas City Chiefs, winning a game 3-0 at the end of the season. So when you look back at this, if you go watch this game, you can find it on YouTube or probably the NFL Network. This is one of the greatest Super Bowl games ever played. There were lead changes, there were trick plays, there were legendary plays in the fourth quarter. Now, the problem for the Rams, those legendary plays, as most legendary plays are made by legends. And the legends played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for On This Day today. Remember, you can catch us every day on this day. So, this is Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.